Labor and delivery nurses of Reddit. How do the fathers react when the baby is obviously not theirs? I'm not, but my grandmother who works as a nurse told me this just now. I remember when I used to work on the maternity wards, she was just a nurse, not a midwife, that a baby was born that had black hair to two blonde parents. I was speaking to the father and this didn't seem to faze him since both of his parents had black hair and he seemed well educated. She, on the other hand, when the father left the room, obviously exhausted and slightly confused, said to the midwife, "He has black hair. We're both blonde, who has he been sleeping with? Can I have a maternity test? Do hospitals do that?" I've told this before, it's semi-related but still funny. My friend is half Filipino, and his wife is African American. So when their first child was born, they took him home and thought his skin seemed a little yellowish, so they took him to the doctor to check for jaundice. The nurse said, "Well, what color is he supposed to be?" And they were like, "We don't know." I had one woman that refused to push when she was fully dilated. I asked everyone to get out of the room so I could do an examination, and while we were alone asked her why she wasn't wanting to push out the baby. She was afraid the baby was going to be black. Both her and her husband were white. Not a nurse, but I work in the blood bank portion of the lab. We type newborns' blood to detect possible incompatibilities between the mother and the baby. Sometimes nurses call saying something like, if the mother is O positive and the father is A positive, can they have a B positive child? I usually just say that a lot of people are mistaken about their own blood type, which they are, and we will recheck our testing and paperwork. It's awkward and I don't even have to talk to patients. I've been an OBRN for 10 years and honestly, this is extremely rare. I've never seen it and I don't know any other nurses who have. Babies pretty much all look alike. They don't have distinctive eye color. Some races look like other races. Even black babies are very light colored at birth. So even if the baby isn't the assumed father's, it's pretty impossible to tell. I've had a few patients who had two potential baby daddies. One who was cheating on her husband and he didn't know, but the boyfriend would come visit after the husband went home. And one who had two men with her in the delivery room waiting to see if the baby looked more like one or the other. When I went to the hospital in labor with my first child, the front desk stalled my husband with some paperwork while they took me up to the L&D floor. Since we'd pre-registered, we were a little confused. Once I was alone with a nurse, she asked very seriously if I wanted my husband to be allowed up or if there was someone else I wanted them to call. It was a small rural town and apparently my husband isn't the father was common enough that they had a procedure in place. My mom is a midwife, but this is a personal story. My father's business partner's wife cheated on him. He had an inkling that their third baby wasn't his. This first two were IVF, so her spontaneous pregnancy was a shock. When it came out, it was obvious it looked like a police officer that she had an affair with. The father was devastated but raised him as his own, because regardless it was his daughter's brother. I work at a county hospital, and I think what's just as shocking as seeing/finding out a baby isn't the dad's, which is hard at first because it takes a while for baby to develop pigment. A black baby could look white, are a lot of the very young dads feeling totally detached and resentful towards the baby and the mom. We had one guy who was sitting in the nursery almost on crying, not because his GF gave birth, but he couldn't go on his full ride to an amazing college out of state anymore, and had to do construction with his soon-to-be father-in-law. Another guy kept telling his baby mama how gross she was looking while giving birth to their daughter. It was cringe-worthy. So many of the young guys are more focused on their phones, rather than helping take care of the baby. We try to promote bonding between them, but they are only between 16 to 20 and are really regretting their actions. Edit, at least for me, a lot of really great comments from dads are being hidden on mobile and explain that sometimes dads don't get the same bonding with the infant over 9 months because they aren't the pregnant ones. Also, many people have never seen a birth, and that in itself is a super traumatic experience because it's a bloody, poopy, soupy mess. The number of great dads far outweighs the number of bad ones. Dads rule. Working with military medicine will show you the wonderful world of infidelity. One mother delivered her child a few months after her husband returned from a 9-month deployment. The gentleman stood outside the room and waited until the delivery was finished so he could sign the paperwork. Oddly enough, under father he signed it as unknown and left. Over the next few hours 4 or 5 other Marines came up to pay her a visit. That was a really awkward night in the hospital. A lot of fathers have never seen a newborn before and most of them look alike. Experienced nurses can tell at a glance, usually, if a baby is a different race from the father. Most of the time, they are so stoked from the birth process that they aren't even noticing any differences. Although, I do get a lot of black fathers exclaiming that their baby is white at birth. Is this a thing? I had two grandmas ask me, is it normal for the baby to be this color? I had not looked at the baby yet and told them all babies are a little blue at birth. Then I noticed the baby was black. Married mom and dad were white, and this baby was going to be a junior. They were still acting as if nothing was out of sorts when they were discharged a day or two later. Oh, and another story, there are recessive genes as well. I have friends who are a mixed couple and their last child was white, red-haired, not albino looking. Looked Irish. No fooling around involved. This is a not me but. My stepsister is one of these mothers. In college she got pregnant and gave birth to a boy with blonde hair and blue eyes. A couple years later she got married to the father while she was once again pregnant. Baby number 2 came out very much black. They ended up staying together because baby number 2's dad wants nothing to do with it. Her husband now raises him and their first child on his own because she ended up leaving him for another woman. She's a bitch. I have a mixed son, I'm black, his father is white. After he was born I took a picture of him for my coworkers to see. A month later I come back to work and one coworker was confused about the photo. All he could say was, "But he's white." He thought that because I'm black, he would automatically come out dark. My wife is a nurse, not in L&D though. In her hospital, I'm sure in others too, when a baby is born a sound goes off throughout the entire hospital. A chime or something. All the women go ah. She says on very rare occasions you will hear the chime and within 5 to 10 minutes after you hear over the intercom a call for a code yellow or whatever color it is, in L&D. That means a fight is occurring or some type of physical rampage and for any well-built male to come help with the situation. Maybe a coincidence. But probably not. Irrelevant story. My husband is half Mexican. When our son was born, he took one look at him and said, "He doesn't look very Mexican." Cue awkward looks from the nurses. He was not actually upset though, just joking. My husband looks pretty white himself. I actually offered to get a paternity test done, since he and I were FWBs when I found out I was pregnant, and both sleeping with other people. I was 99.9% sure due to timing and other factors, and my son does look a lot like him, once you get past the fact he's got blonde hair and blue eyes and should probably be named Whitey McQuierson. My husband declined to get the test done. He believes our son is his, but I'd always be open to getting the test if he ever decides he wants to be 100% sure. At this point, it seems moot. We're happily married and his dada, so. Not a nurse, I'm a phlebotomist, but we've had more cases of unwed women not letting their SO sign the birth certificate even if he was the biological father. The men react poorly, obviously, and make a scene in the hospital. The OB ward here has extra security because people are famous for taking babies too. Before anyone asks, Ohio. Also, for some reason, newborns are posted online for most hospitals along with their full name. I urge some of you to Google your nearest hospital and look at the ridiculous names people give their kids. This is probably way too late to be seen, but I'll share anyway. My white mother was married to my white father when she got pregnant with my younger brother. She was working at a Chinese restaurant at the time. My little brother is half Chinese. I assume my mother knew the chances of that happening were pretty good, because she took off across the country to give birth. Eventually, she moved us back to our home state, and my father wasn't at all surprised by my brother's ethnicity, given my mother's well-known proclivity towards sleeping around. Because they were married at the time of my brother's birth, my father is legally his father. He was forced to pay child support by the state, even though my mother never went back to him, and you can pretty clearly tell they are not blood related. My father always loved my brother, though. He never said he wasn't his son, never complained about paying the support. Even years later after they hadn't spoken in ages, Dad had no problem signing paperwork so my brother could marry his immigrant wife. I think the saddest part of this story is the fact that my brother will never know who his real father is, and I doubt his biological father even knows of his existence. Although this doesn't seem to bother him in the least. If works in a maternity ward and this rarely happens according to her. What happens more is people who should not be having kids come in. They had a mother one time who admitted to using meth during labor because she was afraid of the pain. She said the worst fathers to deal with are the lesbian couples who did IVF. The one who did not carry the baby is clearly not the mother, and it is kind of a medical gray area on how to put that relationship into the computer. A lot of times the egg will be from the father other mother? And then the other partner will carry the baby. My wife said these father-mothers are usually aggressive and combative, and sometimes they are abusive toward the birthing mother. Every delivery they have to get the laboring mother alone and ask her a bunch of well-being questions, and my wife said the lesbian moms usually always complain about abuse. I was surprised because two women. I've only seen this happen once, and it was while I was in school during a rotation on the LAB-D floor. The mother and father were both dark-skinned, the baby came out, very light, and pink, as babies do. I remember the attending physician and nurse trying to speak quietly with the father, who had stormed out of the room and explained that dark-skinned babies gain pigmentation after birth, but he wasn't trying to hear any of it. I don't know how the situation ended, but the baby was cute as a button. Thanks for watching, guys. What did you think of this video? Have you seen or heard any stories like this? If you have, let me know down in the comments section. Please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. Daily space facts before you leave, 'cause I'm an astronaut. Enceladus, one of Saturn's smaller moons, reflects 90% of the sun's light. So make sure to carry loads of sunscreen when you visit Enceladus.